Welcome to this Tech Ability webinar on funding for assistive technology. Please press subscribe underneath the video if you want more of this content. And if it was useful, please hit the like and leave us any feedback or questions in the comments.
So welcome everyone to Funding for Assistive Technology. This is a webinar by Tech Ability, and it's myself, Neil Harrod-Beck, and Phil McIntyre is at a conference today, but he was very kind in sending through a few slides on AAC, so we'll be able to share those with you. Let me know if there's any questions as we go along. You can use the chat or the Q&A, and I'll make sure that these slides and the recording are shared around afterwards. So today we're going to talk about the preparation that you need. We're going to talk about making use of the networks, what funders are available, just some tips that have come from people who work in fundraising, and hopefully some resources that will help you with assistive technology funding. So I can see by those attending that we've got a range of different organisations. So I know that there'll be some smaller organisations, some larger, and hopefully what we've got today, there'll be something for everyone. But let us know if you think there's something that isn't covered. So talking about preparation, so right from the start, are you needs assessing for your learners? Are you assessing them? And do you know that this is going to be the right technology? Because the worst case scenario would be to go through all that effort of fundraising and getting funding for the technology and then it not being the right solution. Of course, there are ways, that you can make sure that's covered when you look at return policies and things like that. But ideally, we want it right from the start. So just make sure you've got some kind of AT assessment in place. Again, we can help with that. We've got webinars and resources and some paperwork as well. So never feel like you can't ask for that. That's absolutely fine. See if you can try before you buy, depending on where you're buying from and what device it is that you're buying or what software you're buying. That's always a good way of making sure that it's the right fit. Think about future support and training. It's often something that organizations forget with the and just become focused on the devices. And that's a really good way of making sure that your device, it's more likely to fail if you don't have the support. But of course, that support and training is often the hardest thing to find funding for as well, because you need that consistency with salaries and things like that. It's also very hard to kind of get people to fund that. And yeah, that support and training, don't just think about the student, but also think about those supporting the user, and that could be staff or family or friends. So those are the things that we need in place in the first place. And often you'll find this will be useful because when you're applying for funding, you'll need to justify and show that you've thought about these things. So it's a really good start. See if you can read some reviews on the item that you're buying, get some advice, use the sales team that's there. They can answer questions. Sometimes they can do demonstrations. Just yesterday, I had a demonstration of the Skyle eye gaze unit, and that's for iPads. That was really useful because I hadn't seen it in action before. So yeah, see if you can get some demonstrations as well. Some companies are only too happy to share that information. Consider your scale and your budget. Consult your staff and your users. Make sure that everyone's on board with this. Again, that's going to make it more successful. Value your time. So just because a device is cheaper doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to spend more time setting it up. So sometimes it's worth buying that support with the product. So buying from a company that has that support built in. And just consider what space the tech will be used in. If it's a communication aid, it might just follow the learn around, and that's fine. But even then, you might need to consider where is it going to be charged, who's going to be responsible for the charging, or if it's something like a touch screen, you might need to consider what room it's going to be used in. Is that room always available? there's a lot of different considerations of what space it's going to be used in. And yeah, the picture on the right is the click-on device from Inclusive Technologies, which means that you can use switches to turn on electronic items. Where possible, use networks. So if you're a NatSpec member or Carton member, we've got the Champions network. So what I'd like to do more and more is for members to be able to swap, sell, buy and use kits, just to get that being used. It might involve sharing resources, particularly when we're thinking about virtual reality and things like that. Often one organization might have virtual reality or some kind of expensive kit that maybe need more users and more things. So you can partner with each other and make use of that. So that's a really good way. So partnerships are a really good build because you can make use of your different skills sets. And it might just involve speaking to the network about the details of what they bought, what worked. You know, if it's a large bid, you can talk about kind of fixtures and fittings and all the details, all the small stuff that makes the big things happen. It's all really useful. There are a growing number of AT providers as well, willing to offer trials or free licenses for assessment. Now you can go to them directly, or for the Champions, we're building up a forum page where they've provided the details of how you go about getting those trial licenses or free trials. So if you're a champion or you're kind of NatSpec member or Carton Centre, then make use of that. If you're not, then just let us know. We have considered using or setting up something for people who are non-NatSpec members and Carton Centres for a small fee, so that we can help other people kind of access this information. Okay, so the NHS is often a first port of call. It's unlikely that you're going to forget about it, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page, it's really good to see what's available for the NHS, especially when you're looking at AAC devices. So that's the communication aids, the electronic ones. So they're now commissioned as specialised and local AAC services. So they're a good point of call. Your speech language therapist will probably have a better understanding if it is AAC devices. But yeah, they provide assessment, review and equipment. And it's the way that you get students funded for their time after, so their time with you, or beyond that into their kind of workplaces, other education, going back home. So it's really worth considering. And yeah, I've included the guide there for guidance for commissioning AAC services and equipment. It's quite a heavy document, but there is the kind of small print and extra detail that you might need there. Now, a good way to navigate all the information is through some kind of trusts and charitable trusts, and I've just included some of the most popular ones here. There are more, and I'll share with you a guide where you can get into a lot more. So Make-A-Wish Foundation is to do with life-limiting or life-threatening conditions. So it just means that it says a child there, but yeah, they can choose a wish that's unique to them. So something that would be really important to them around technology could be funded in this way. The Sequel Trust, they supply the devices that fall under AAC, so this is actually specific AAC funding, and they're also able to supply AT around it. So the example they give is if there's an eye gaze machine, they can fund that, but they can also possibly fund a wheelchair mount to make it easier for them to communicate. Got the Motor Neurone Disease Association, so they support everything to do with motor neurone disease, and they're quite quick at getting the equipment to people that need it. So there is an equipment loan service that's supported by Carton. There's also financial support grants and lots more information on their webpage. I've included Communication Matters because they did used to give £200 small grants, but they're not currently offering those. It might be yeah, it'd be good to know if they are at some point. So if anyone knows, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll try and find out next time I talk to them. So Communication Matters is a really useful resource for that focus on speech language therapy. They've got some really good resources, and the first one is Funding for Communication Aids fact sheet. And this breaks down a lot of the information that you'll need for the funding. It also includes the links to the AAC Companies Direct. And when I was saying earlier about they're really good to contact with free trials and demonstrations, that's a really good example of companies that do that. They've also got another page on, it starts off as assessment, but then it also goes into funding and even insurance as well, which is worth thinking about. The webpage says it's being reviewed, but it looks functional to me. It still looks really useful. So I recently attended a fundraising event, and I've taken some of the kind of highlights from that, just in a kind of top 8, which I hope you'll find the most useful. So Stephen Tung was one of the ones present from Henshaw's, and he said that fundraising is relationship building. That's a really important thing to think throughout this, that will underpin it. Not all colleges will have the scale to employ a large team of fundraising staff, but all of us can do something to improve outcomes. So here are the kind of top tips. Number 1, the senior leadership, first of all, needs to have a clear purpose and business case. What would they want funding for? How's it going to be spent? Who will be approached? And based on those things, we'll change which of the following tips you follow and which of the following things you do. So maybe it's one specific piece of equipment. That's a different strategy to ongoing support for a number of pieces of equipment. So it's worth considering that. You need to talk about risk. So especially if you're putting resources into fundraising, there is a risk of that not paying off. So you need to talk about risk and reward. Consider how much expenditure that's going to cost. The sooner you have these conversations, the better. Dedicated staff, if you're actually hiring fundraising staff, the general rule is that you're unlikely to recoup the salary in the first 6 months. So it's just worth thinking of that as an investment. Number 3, build and keep contacts. So as you're talking to people, as you're meeting people at events, things like that, just make sure you've got some way of capturing their information, and you can work within GDPR. Obviously, you've got to be careful. You've got to ask for permission, but don't overcompensate. That if people want to stay in touch, then you should be able to do that really, and you can use common tools to do this. So newsletters, Christmas birthday cards, talking about legacy payments, which are kind of things that will be more ongoing, but be respectful and ask permissions, obviously, with these. And the general advice was to take them on a journey. So sharing what you're doing with them, showing how the money is being spent, and that will be really motivating and encourage them to do more. Obviously, a lot of this is best case scenario. It might be that you just start off with a newsletter or something like that. You don't have to do this all at once. Events are really useful, and you can use local supported companies to do these: charity, community work, team building exercises, and that type of thing. A lot of companies are looking for these type of events. So whether it's the kind of mud runs or kind of sales or baking events or whatever it is that you can think of, it's good to build those links with local companies. You can, as I've said before, it's better to focus on equipment and resources rather than try and fundraise for staff. That's quite hard to do. Yeah, it's just the easiest to fundraise for and to show the impacts of what you're doing with that. Make use of staff, parents, and the wider community. There's often hidden talents, so parents who also do something else as their kind of main job, who could use some of those skills to help you out. So don't be frightened about sharing with them your aims and objectives. If we go back to point number 1, talking about that plan, if you've got that plan and you can share that with other people, you're more likely to get people who are able to help out and just do their bit. Obviously, in many centres and colleges, probably most staff are very have an awful lot on their plate, and there's always more they can do. So we have to be really cautious when putting more onto them. But for some, it can be fun, and for others, it's they can really see the benefits of that with the equipment that's coming in to help the people they work with. Others to consider are Freemasons, women's institutes, other trusts and foundations, Sea Cadets or kind of similar groups around brownies and things like that are quite useful if you need people to do some fun things around events as well, so they can help out. And it's also worth considering using online platforms to find out more about fundraising. So you can type in just fundraising support groups on platforms like Facebook, and on the left-hand side there's charity fundraising with 11,000 members, and that's set up specifically for charities and charity fundraisers. There's another one with donations and fundraising for people in need, that's 42k members. There's non-profit fundraising professionals, that's got 5.7k members. There's a lot of these resources. Obviously, if you're in NatSpec as well, make sure to use the NatSpec forums. And on the right-hand side, there's a useful Twitter account to follow, and that's @DSC_charity. I'll be sharing some of their resources shortly. Okay, so yeah, just to say a thank you to Yola and the rest of the team who put together the NatSpec Peer Exchange Week, because this information was really useful, and it was really good to distill this from quite a long session into some quick bullets, and I hope it will help you. This is probably the thing that I was most excited to find when I was looking at this. So the Funding Finder database has hundreds of other free grant funding databases and online funder lists. It gives you more click through to more funding than any other directory. And there's also some really useful tools there. So a fundraising health check, and it includes 50 plus downloadable trust and foundation grant funding lists. So here's this idea that you don't need to all reinvent your own kind of fundraising tools and resources. A lot of it exists out there. So this is a fantastic resource. So make sure you share this with people in your organization who you think might find it useful. And everything is free. It's hard to work out what's not to like about this, apart from maybe too much choice. So that's really useful. Now this is the next one, this grant making trusts. This is considered as a kind of Bible of useful things, and it's got a yearly edition. So the latest one is 2022, 2023. It costs 125, which is not nothing. So if you're already just fundraising for a small item, you know it's worth considering. But it gives you in total they say 5.6 billion pounds, and that's total awarded by the 2,000 funders featured in the edition. So it comes from grant making charities, each with the potential to give around 50,000 or more per year. So no charity, big or small, should be without it. Now the link that I've got here has even more links to other useful guides as well. So it isn't just this book that you can buy there. There's actually some free links there as well that are worth checking out. Okay, so coming towards the end of the webinar now. Let me know if there's any questions that you've got. I can probably share some of the, yeah, you can have a look at some of the websites if you like as well. Please let me know if there's anything that you think has been useful today. It'd be really good to know what you're going to go away and take and use. That'd be really useful feedback. But I just want to say it's really important to protect your investment. So once you've got it, be clear who's responsible, have clear expectations of how it's going to be used, when it's going to be used, mark it where necessary. So there's a Dymo labeler machine on the right hand side there. That's the kind of thing that you can use just to make sure that things are labeled and kept safe. Make time to roll these out with training and support. The worst thing to be would be to have it away in a cupboard somewhere. Have an end of life plan. Some devices, they can last for a long time. Things like laptops, you ideally want to change them every 3 years or so. And the idea is that there's still some value to them when you sell them on after 3 years. So you're never hit with those massive costs of new without having recouped some costs from that. Ultimately, use it, kind of get it out there, make sure your staff are aware of it, take any training, give feedback sessions, and share best practice as well, because the next time you go for funding, or the next time you're trying to talk to your networks about funding, you can talk to them about what you've done previously with the money that's been raised. So always think about the next steps, obviously with student consent and anyone else involved. Okay, so that was the fundraising webinar. I'll leave the chat open for a bit if anyone wants to ask any questions or anyone's got any comments. And yeah, let me know if there's anything that's not been covered. I'll make sure to share the slides around and upload this recording. Okay, thanks very much, everyone.